Okay, well, good morning. Looks like we're starting late. Mhm. All right, let's begin. So we learned the Mishnah yesterday, and the Mishnah had mentioned about the mitzvah of Arava, how they did it. They would get these morbios, seemingly these large branches of Aravos, from a place called Maitza, the Mishnah says. The Gemara says it was called Kolonya, a place where they didn't, Kolonya meaning a place where they didn't have to pay taxes from. But it seems like the name of the place was called Maitza, but the Gemara says that it really means the same thing. Maitza was excluded from taxes. So maybe we don't really know what the name of the place is. It was a Makam Kolonya, and it was called Maitza, which might mean that they did call it that name, or just maybe it got that name because it was free from taxes. Maybe there was another name as well for it. I don't know. We don't know. But it was a place called Maitza, and they got the Arabis from there. And commentaries mention that the point is that they were owned, or I should say, they were not owned by anyone, and they were hefker. They were ownerless. In this way, there was no shilas uh, taking ravais that were not theirs. You know, the gezel that were stolen, mitzvah b'avera, no shilas. It was not. They made sure to get ravais from no man's land. And the Mishnah continued, and it mentioned that they would stand these aravais on the side of the mizbeach, but the tips of them would bend over the mizbeach. It also mentions that Taku, Vahariu, Vataku, they would blow the trumpets, and that was connected to Simcha, to joy, or at least Taisus brings that the joy of this ceremony, um, possibly connected to the Arava ceremony. Possibly the Arava ceremony was done at the same time that they drew the water. So maybe the blowing of the trumpets was connected to the time that it was done was when they did the water ceremony as well, and therefore the simcha, the joy of the water ceremony, was done at the same time. They ended up blowing the trumpets then as well. So again, it seems to be two understandings of Taisvis. What the joy was, the joy connected to the Arava ceremony specifically, or was it connected to the water ceremony? Then the Mishnah had mentioned about the going around the Mizbeach. They would go around the Mizbeach, Makifin Mizbeach, every day of Sukkot, they would go once, and on Shana Rabbah, they would go 7 times. And what would they say when they went around the Mizbeach? There were two opinions, either Ana Hashem Hoshiana, or an Ana Hashem Atzlichana, or Aniva Hoy Hoshiana. And on Hoshana Rabbah, they would do it 7 times. Now, what was the meaning of this? Ana Hashem Hashiana, Ana Hashem Atzlichana, or Aniva Hoy Hashiana. So the Aniva Hoy Hashiana was the same gematria as Ana Hashem Hashiana. Aniva Hoy or Ana Hashem basically is the same. It's almost the same letters even. And we also mentioned that if you take these 3 psukim in Parshas Beshalach, so each of these psukim have 72 letters. So if you line them all up next to each other, they'll start and end exactly the same place because it's all 72 letters. And then you could join the words, make words out of all this combination. Again, if you line up 3 psukim, one on top of the other, you will get the first combination of these 3 psukim. You will get v'hoy. In the 37th combination of these 3 psukim, you will get ani. So ani v'hoy is is connected to the 72 letter, the combination of the name of Hashem from these 72, I guess you would say it's 72 combinations that are Hashem's names. And each of these is, so Ani Vahoy Hoshiana is basically Hashem, please save, please save us. Now, the question really is, so what's the meaning? What's the deeper meaning of this? So very Kabbalistic 72 letter name of Hashem, or combinations, 72 combinations that make up the name of Hashem. So Taisvis is bothered with this. He says, "Adayon tzorich tam." We need a little understanding. What are these? What's unique about these two names, Ani v'Hoy? And he says it really emphasizes how Hashem is with us in our suffering. And he brings two psukim. One is Ani and one is Vahu. And in the fact that there's a Vav in front of those two words. One is a pasuk in Yirmiyah, a pasuk in Yechezkel. And it basically emphasizes that Imoy anoichi b'tzara, Hashem is with us in our suffering. Because one of the places is talking about Yechezkel says, I am in Goyla, and it says Va'ani, and I am in exile. What does the "and I am in exile" mean? It means together with Hashem. Hashem is with me in exile. And then the pasuk in Yirmiyah is Vahu Aser Bazikim, and he is chained up. He is tied up in chains. And it says Vihu, and Yirmiyah is tied up in chains. And what it means is, and Hashem is with him. So this so Taisha seems to be saying that Hashem should save himself. Haishana, please, will save us, but save yourself. Do it for your own salvation. Sheyoshia liatzmai. Haishana means save, do the salvation for yourself that you should be saved. So that is the meaning of this idea of the names Ani Vahu, or Ani Vahoy, different girsa, the different versions. Actually, according to Taisvis, it seems like it should be Ani Vahu Hoishiana. I think in the Nusach Sfard we have Ani Vahoy or Nusach Hari, but I think there are girsais. There are some Sidurim that have Ani Vahu, and that would seem like Taisvis is following that, because he's saying the Vahu is connected to the word Vahu Aser Bazikim. It's connected to a pasuk in Yirmiyah, Vahu, Ani Vahu Haishiana, and Ani is a pasuk in Yechezkel, and Vahu is a pasuk in Yirmiyah, and it's basically bringing up that idea that Hashem is with us, B'tzara, and that's the meaning of this prayer while we're doing the Arava ceremony, and we're bringing to mind that Hashem is with us in our suffering, and Hashem should save us because he'll be saving himself. And I should mention also, there is a chizkuni in Shemais that mentions that the psukim that we're dealing with, of course, are talking about the splitting of the sea, and the Arava ceremony is connected, or the prayers of the Arava ceremony are connected to the fact that on Sukkot we are judged on the water. So these psukim are connected to the fact that Hashem split the sea, connected to the so these names of Hashem are sort of like a prayer for the connected to water. And so if we're going to be praying for water on Sukkot, it says b'chag nidonim ala mayim, So because we're praying for water, it makes sense to mention the psukim, the name of Hashem in the psukim that dealing with Hashem's power over the water. Hashem should bless the waters. We should have a blessed year with water. So that also maybe gives us a little understanding of Ani Vahu, why we're picking these three psukim, why we specifically wanna, why this rabbi of the Mishnah, Reb Yehuda, why he would emphasize bringing in those words from the psukim that talk about the splitting of the sea. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, on Sukkot, after we do the go around for the Hoshanas, we say that paragraph that starts Koshata Elim Balud, and one of the verses has something about that the word Vayosha, that he, Hashem, saved, can be revaled to be read as Vayivasha, that Hashem was saved.
Right, the same idea. Right. Okay, good. Wow. Most people don't know the translation of the sukkim that we read on Hoshana Rabbah. They just doesn't read as smoothly. Very nice. Shkoyach, yeah. Very, very nice. Okay. So then the Mishnah mentions that when they finished, what would they say? Yoifi l'cha mizbeach, Rabbi Eliezer says, l'ko u'lecha mizbeach. Basically, praising either Yoifi l'cha mizbeach, that we are thankful to you, the mizbeach, for bringing atonement to us, or to Hashem and to the mizbeach. L'ka u'lecha, what was the words? L'ka u'lecha mizbeach, l'ka u'lecha mizbeach, that we're giving thanks and praise, we're doing honor for you, for Hashem and for the mizbeach. We're doing this as an honor for the mizbeach. The Gemara will talk about how that's appropriate to really include something with Hashem, even to you, Hashem, and to the Mizbeach in the same sentence. Would that be appropriate? Gemara will mention a little change in how we understand that. Now, the Gemara then says the same way this was done on a weekday, it was basically done on Shabbos also, if Shabbos fell on Hoshana Rabbah, but they would gather they would harvest the morbios, these large branches. They would cut them before Shabbos and gather them and put them in and make sure they don't dry out. And the Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika then says about that that they use these charios, not morbios, but charios. Charios is a term used for the big branches of the palm tree, of a dekel, a palm tree. And they would bang them on the ground, and chayvtanis and bekarka on the side of the mizbeach, and it was called chibot charios. And so there's a discussion if that, what that means, and we'll see in the Gemara really two opinions about this, and we'll see on side 2 about on page 45b on the next side of the page. We'll see about the different understandings, and does it mean that they would do this every day of Sukkot, or was it only done on Hoshana Rabbah with these branches of the palm branch? Also, was it in was it in addition to the Arava ceremony, or was it in substitution for the Arava ceremony? So that would be something that we'll see on base on the second side of this page. Now, the final statement in the Mishnah was also a little confusing. There are two ways of learning it. Does it mean that the adults would take from the children, they would take the lulavs and then they would eat their esrogim? Or does it mean that right after they finished, the children would take their lulavs and play with it and eat, and eat their esrogim. But basically, there's two ways of learning this. That either the adults would take the way Rashi learns it, the adults would take the children's lulavim, and it was not a problem of gezel. It wasn't a problem of darkei shalom. That was normally you're not allowed to. Well, you can't steal. That's called gezel. But you also even something that's not children's, because let's say children don't have the ability to take ownership of something unless an adult hands it to them, gives it to them. But for themselves to take ownership, let's say something is hefker, is ownerless. A child doesn't have the ability to take ownership of it. Nevertheless, an adult can't go and steal it from them. What do you mean? It's not the children's. True, but there's a concept of darkei shalom, peaceful
ways.
Okay, ways of peace. So even if something is not considered owned by the children, we have to act in ways of peace and not steal it from them. So nevertheless, when it comes to Sukkot, as part of the joy and the simcha, part of the joyous occasion, it was not considered stealing, and it wasn't considered going against this concept of darkei shalom, ways of peace, taking it from the children, part of the game, so to speak. That this was the game that they played. This was the fun. This was the fun. They would take it from the shoimtim as lulavim. They would somehow slip their lulavim away from them and eat the yasregim, and that was some element of joy. Again, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if anyone here has a better understanding of it. I can't really understand why it was so joyous to do that, but somehow this.
What, for kids to grab things from adults and eat them and take them away?
If the kids would take it from the adults is one thing. Here, it seems like the adults took it from the kids.
Afterwards, they put them down, the kids grabbed them or whatever, and they went back and forth. But my question is this: are we saying that when a child takes something, the question is, you cannot take it for yourself, I understand that. But when he takes it, is he taking it on behalf of his father? No, we do not have a concept of that the father takes it through the child. It's the kids. So now, well, it's not the kid can't take it, but if the adult grabs it, it is only darkei shalom that we argue with him. What are you making a commotion? You know, everything was nice and quiet. You had to chepa, so you made a big fuss out of it. But if it's something of substantial value, I'm only questioning who would be the plaintiff on behalf of the child, besides the shayfet as to enforce darkei shalom. We have a different court system. It's not that the rabbis cannot get involved in the discussion. On the contrary, they are supposed to direct the conflict or the hearing or whatever you want to call it. But I'm just questioning, where does...
Yeah, you're asking about darkei shalom, how it would work, not regarding lulav and esrog, but in a regular case where it wasn't simcha, where it didn't involve some joyous occasion. How does it work when a child owns something only from darkei shalom? Is he able to enforce that in Bezdin? In other words, how does that get enforced? That's what you're wondering, right? If
it does, or is
it enforced, or is it not enforced in Bezdin?
Or is it like while you chepping, the same way we do it now with a kid? When somebody takes something away from a kid and the kid starts screaming, you say to the guy, "Why are you making a commotion here? Give it back to the kid."
Right. So you're wondering, to what extent do we enforce that?
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm sure it's in Rambam or Choshen Mishpat. We could probably look it up under darkei shalom.
Right.
Under the laws of children. You could look it up in the
But
encyclopedia.
I'm saying definitely do not have a concept of the child is taking it on behalf of the parents, so that there's an adult somewhere behind the child when the child takes something.
Yeah, no, I don't know of such a level of
Right,
kinyan,
that
such
we don't
concept of
have.
kinyan. It works the other way. If it's from Hefker, a child, can get it, or if the adult gives it to the child, then the child takes full ownership of it. So that's a real kinyan if the child, if the adult gives it to the child. Taisvis, I mentioned yesterday over here, brings down that this concept is also applicable for laws regarding a certain thing that they used to do with chasanim. They would make some type of a play fight. And what used to happen was, even though it was a play fight, people would get hurt or things would get ruined. Clothing would get torn, and the animal sometimes got hurt. So, would you be responsible to pay for it? So Taisa says, just like in our case, when they would take these lulavim and esrogim from the kids, you don't have to pay them back. So there also, because of simcha, the concept is that people waive their rights to be able to expect anything back. That's pretty much what we're saying. When it comes to simcha, when it comes to some joyous minhag based on joy, you waive your rights, and you're not going to be able to, get anything back if something goes wrong. Now, the Shulchan Aruch brings this concept regarding Purim. If you're drunk on Purim and you damage someone or something, are you going to be responsible to pay? You're drinking out of simcha, and you're rejoicing and you're dancing and you're running around, and you end up ripping someone's shirt, or what would the halacha be? Would you be obligated to pay, or do you does everyone waive their rights? And there seems to be, in Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah brings down in the laws of Purim, he brings down that it depends if it's a big type of damage or a small damage. A small damage, people waive their rights. There was also a question: is there a difference between if it's a personal, if it's a bodily damage, or if it's only a financial or money damage, where it's your possessions get hurt, or does it also apply to your body? So that also seems to be something that's discussed. The Mishnah Berurah, from what I saw, it seems like Mishnah Berurah doesn't make a difference. It depends if it's big damage or small damage. But I believe there might be other opinions. Again, I could look it up. It's in the laws of Purim, and but bottom line is, it's based on the same halacha here, that do you have to pay back? Do you waive your rights when it comes to simcha? The people, if that's the minhag, to be joyous and be a little clumsy, or be a little not so responsible. If that's the minhag, is that acceptable in in the laws of choshen mishpat, in the laws of monetary laws? And this Mishnah seems to say that that's okay. They would play with these lulav and take them away from the kids, and it seems like and they wouldn't necessarily give them back. They would eat the esrogim. So you were exempt from paying back. That's the understanding. Now there is another way of reading it, and it basically is, the kids would eat their esrogim. So the kids would eat they would slip out their lulavim, and they would eat their esrogim. And according to that, you don't really have this same understanding. Because according to that, we're not talking about out of joy, you would they would steal, so to speak, or play this game. It just says that the children they would be finished with their lulavim and esrogim. They would then miyad, immediately, comma, hatinoikas shemten es lulaveim. the children would then take their lulavim and they would eat their esrogim. And this gets into the discussion, which we'll see in the Gemara, about huktzah lemitzvasa. The children would eat their esrogim. What do you mean? This is the 7th day of Sukkot. Isn't there esrog muktzah? So this is this gets into so that's sort of what the Mishnah seems to be emphasizing. If you learn it this other way, of course we'll have to see in the Gemara, but the other way of learning it would imply like it's permissible to benefit from the esrog, even though it's really set aside for the mitzvah. And on the other hand, maybe it's only the children's esrog that's set aside. It's not fully set aside for the mitzvah, because the children's mitzvah is only chinuch. So it could be it's only drabanan, it's only rabbinic. So it's not, and so maybe it doesn't really have the concept of huktzah lemitzvasa, that it's set aside for the mitzvah. So in other words, the children would take their lulavim and eat them. So that would sort of give us an understanding of why they were allowed to benefit from it, even though it's Sukkot. We had a story a while back about a rabbi eating from his esrog after he benched esrog. Now there we dealt with also huktzah lemitzvasa. It would seem like it should be set aside for the mitzvah. How are you allowed to benefit from the esrog? And there we had different understandings of how he did it. He had 2 esrogim, and this one he wasn't planning on using for the mitzvah. And so it wasn't really set aside for the mitzvah, or it was a large esrog, and he set aside the amount needed for the mitzvah, and the amount that he bid off was not a problem. The different ways of understanding it and dealing with that issue of huktzah lemitzvasa, if it's set aside for the mitzvah. Again, we'll deal with it in the Gemara, but this is just giving you a little understanding until we get there. Now, the Gemara, first statement of the Gemara talked about this place called Meitzah, and it said that the Meitzah is a place where it was kolonya, where they were exempt from taxes, and the reason why our Mishnah calls it Meitzah was basically the same idea. It was excluded. Meitzah means it went out. It was excluded from the laws of the taxes to the king, and then they would use the aravais from there for this ceremony. Now, the Mishnah then says they would be zoykef it b'tzidei hamizbeach. They would stand them up in the side of the mizbeach. And if you remember, the Gemara earlier talked about the fact that there's a question in the Gemara: is arava supposed to be done binetila or is it bizakifa? But even if you hold that it's binetila, that they would wave the arava, that was one of the main, that was an important aspect of the arava. Nevertheless, it was also stood up by the mizbeach. In other words, everyone agrees that the aravas would also they would also stand them up by the mizbeach. It was just a question of did they walk around the mizbeach with the aravais or with the lulav and esrog? Now, the Gemara then says that the aravais, how long would these aravais? So the Gemara tells us that this concept, the Mishnah had really told it to us. It said the Roshehen were kfufin al gabe hamizbeach. The tips were bent over on the top of the mizbeach. And the mizbeach, the Gemara goes through the calculations of how big the mizbeach was. The mizbeach started with a base. The base on the bottom was 1 amma. Then you had the mizbeach was indented. It was the base was a little larger, width and length was bigger, and then came another part of the Mizbeach on top of it, which was smaller in length and smaller in width, and it went up 5 amos. So altogether, with the bottom amma was the yasoid, the base, and then you have the next part of it was 5 amos, altogether 6 amos. And then again, it got smaller. It indented. It was more narrow. The next piece, and that was 3 amos higher. Now, the term the Gemara uses was first there's the yasoid, then you have the 5 amos that it's called the soivev. Now, the soivev, it was different in the Mishkan and in the Mizbeach of the Beis Hamikdash. In the Mishkan, there were 2 soivevs, and the soivev on the side of the Mishkan they would not walk on. Our Gemara is talking about the soivev of the Beis Hamikdash. The soivev of the Beis Hamikdash, this soivev, the kohanim would go on, and they would sprinkle the blood, and that soivev was walked on by the kohanim. In the Mishkan, it wasn't. The Mishkan, it was just it was like it was like a board that was a panel. It was like a panel that was added to the side of the mizbeach. Now, but it wasn't walked on. That was the soivev or the karkoiv that was walked on by the Mishkan was on top. There was an area where they would walk, or the kohanim would walk around. That was on top of the mizbeach, by the horns, by the corners. There was an area there in between the horns, in between the corners, and also 1 amma within that was an area where they would walk around. On the mizbeach of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's what we're talking about here. There's the soivev which was walked on by the kohanim, and that's it was a amma. It indented an amma. In other words, the soivev you could walk on. It was an amma space to walk on. An amma is a cubit, 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet, and it could be walked on. And then it went all the way up. The next piece of the mizbeach was 3 ammas, and that reached to where the corners are. Now the corners went up 1 more amma, so it was 1 plus 3. I'm sorry, 1 plus 5 plus 3 plus 1. So if you add that together, 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 3 is 9, plus 1 would be 10. That means the mizbeach, if you count from the bottom to the top of the corners, was 10 amos. Now the aravais did not bend over on the kronais. They bent over where there were no kronais, no corners. They bent over even on the side. So it was really 9 amos tall, the mizbeach at certain parts of it. Only at the corners was it 10 amos tall. So it was only 9 amos tall. Now, the Gemara understands that if you want the aravais, the willows, to be bent over the mizbeach, we don't want them touching the mizbeach. We don't want them being pulled on the top of the mizbeach. We want them to be just floating over it. If it needs to be floating over it, that's the way the Gemara understands it, that it has to be goiches, like just bent over it, but not actually lying on it. To lie on it, it would have been enough to be 9 amos tall, and then 1 more amma to lie on it. You could say maybe a 10 amma would have been enough. However, you would need a little more because it's on a slant. So you'd need a little more than 10 ammas if it was okay for the aravais to just be lying on the Mizbeach itself, not hanging over it. If it would have been enough, good enough to just have it lying and pulled over it, that would have been enough to have 10 amos, maybe a little extra for the fact that it's on a slant because there's all these indentions in the Mizbeach, and that would have been good enough. But the Gemara says that's not, no. We need it to be 9 amos tall, plus 2 amos, because it's not supposed to touch the Mizbeach. It's got to lean over it. And not only that, it's got to be even more than 11 amos, because there's a slant. Now the Gemara says, well, it was only 11 amos. It wasn't more than 11 amos. So the Gemara says, it was only 11 amos. You know what? They must have placed the aravos not on the floor. They placed it on the side. So you saved 1 amma there. In this way, it's slanted. That's going to take up a little extra space. Something straight takes up less space than something slanted. You lose a little on the slant. And that's going to be all the way to the top is going to be 8 amos plus, because it's on the side, it's on the base, it's not on the floor. So all we need really is 8 amos plus a little for the slant, and then plus 2 for the hanging over, because in order to hang over and not touch it, it's got to be an extra amma up and then an amma down. So we've got 8 plus a little plus 2. So it comes to close to 11. It's between 10 and 11 amos it needs to be at least. And that's what the Gemara says, and that it was 11 amos. Yes, David.
I think I have a picture.
Okay, show it to us. Sounds good.
Is that it?
Yeah, I don't like the picture that much, but okay. I pictured it to be a little more hanging over than that, but okay. I guess and a little more slanted than that. But okay, yeah, listen. It's good.
I enjoy the picture. I'm just showing.
I'm not complaining to you. I'm just telling you how I imagined it. A little more slanted and a little more hanging over, like folded, almost like folded over to the, but
the question I always had was, how do 2 people pass on something that is 1 amma wide? And I believe I had found the answer years ago, which said the Kahanim only moved in one direction. You never had 2 Kahanim going, passing each other in 2 different directions.
Right.
I don't remember if they all had to go to the left. I think they all have to go to the left, because if you went up the ramp and then you made a left and you went around the top of the Mizbeach and then you made a left to come down. Yeah. But they only moved in one direction and turned in one direction while they were doing the Avodah. Right.
But it is a good question, especially because we know that they were extremely fat. The Kohanim, they ate all that meat and fatty meat, so they even had a doctor on premises because they were so fat, it says. So it wasn't so simple for them to get around over there,
Was it because they were fat, or because they had digestive problems because they were eating so much meat?
Well, it goes hand in hand, no? I mean, eating all that meat.
If the person's having digestive problems, it could be the opposite. They could have shilshul, they could have the runs.
That's a different question I always had, is how do you account for people needing to go? And where do you go? And where are you allowed to go? And,
in the Beis Hamikdash, they had a Kisei Shel Kavod, it says.
I don't know. And where?
And Tamid. it mentions there was a tunnel that went under. Anyway, okay, so the Gemara here, we're gonna go over the Gemara now inside, but that's basically the concept here, that we're talking about the Mizbeach, how big it was, and how the Aravais had to hang over. In order to hang over, it had to be up and hanging over because it wasn't supposed to touch the Mizbeach and lie on it, so to speak. It was supposed to be hovering over it. So if it's hovering over it, it had to be a lot bigger than if it was, just pulled on it. It was hovering over it. That's the understanding. So we're going to read the Gemara on page 45a. That it was, they would come and stand it up on the side of the Mizbeach. So we are 45a, about 12 or 15 lines from the bottom of the page. Tana, it was taught that rabbis va'aruchos ugvoyos achas esrei ama, that the rabbis were rabbis, many, although there is another way of reading that it's not rabbis, but it's rakois. There is such a girsa, rakois, from Rebbe Tzalel Ranchberg, brings it from the Ritva, Piskei Rid. But so it could mean rakois, which means they were soft, but or it means there were many. Ba'aruchais long, they were 11 amos tall, at least. Now, kedei, in order sheyehu goichais, in order that they should be goichais, like bent over, al hamizbeach ama, they would be bent over on the mizbeach, an ama from the side of the mizbeach, from the edge of the roof. They would be bent over an amma. So that's the point, that because it was goicha, and it wasn't, Rashi says this a few times. Rashi says this on the side over here, that it couldn't have been nigroros. It had to be goichos. Because it says goichos, it has to be, we need it to be bigger, because it's got to be up and then bent and then sort of hanging over. So this is how big the Aravais were. This is what it was taught, that they were 11 amos tall. Now, Amar Meremar Mishum Mar Zutra. So Meremar says, in the name of Mar Zutra, Shma Mino, we hear from this, Al Hayasoid Manachla. We hear from this that it was placed on the base, I should say they, that the Manach Lahu, they were placed, these branches were placed on the base of the Mizbeach, and this way it would fulfill the need to be hanging over the Mizbeach an Am. This way it would cover all the obligations. Now, why does it have to be standing on the yesod? What would be wrong if it's standing on the floor next to the yesod, next to the base? After all, the mizbeach, even including the base, was only 9 amos, 9 handbreadths, if you don't put the aravais next to the corners. So the mizbeach was only 9 cubits. And then you have 2 extras, it should be good enough. Not really, because it's on a slant. So he says, he goes through this. The isalka daitocha Arab, you're going to think that it's on the ground. Manachlu, he placed they placed the aravais, these branches of willow. Michdi, let's see. Ola ama b'konas ama. It went up, the base went up an ama, and it entered an ama inward. In other words, it's an amma high, an amma indented inward for the which basically means there's going to be a slant here. And then Allah Chamesh, it went up 5 amos, which was the soive, the konas amma, and it entered in another amma, another slant here, because the we keep going inward a little. Another amma inward, the zehu soiviv, that's the soiviv. Allah shalish, then it went another 3 amos high, zehu makom kronos, that reached to where the kronos begin, where the corners start. So you got 1, 5, and 3, and that's where the corner starts, and that would make the Mizbeach 9 handbreadths, and then you got the corner, which would make it altogether 10 where the corners are, and 9 where there's no corner. Now, Goiches al gabe hamizbeach hechem shkachasla. How are you going to have these branches hovering over the mizbeach, bent over the mizbeach? How would you have it? You need it to be a lot bigger than the 9. It would need to be 11, and you also need to make up for the slant. So ela lav shmamina ayasoid manach lahu. It must be that it was placed on the base, and that gave you that extra amount that you could have an extra 2 amos plus an extra amount to cover the slant. Slant in the Hebrew is called alachsoin. So that's how it worked, and this was all based on the fact that it had to be goichos and not nigraros. It had to be hanging over, hovering over, not pulled on it, touching it. Shmamina, this we hear from this that this is the way, that this is how it must have been on top of the Yisoid. That's what we prove from here. So this is the proof. Meramar, in the name of Mar Zutra, says it must be that that's where they placed it. Now it's interesting. The Rambam doesn't bring this halacha about that they were supposed to be 11 amos, seemingly because this was maybe mitzvah min hamuvchar. This is the ideal way, but it wasn't a halacha. It seems that it didn't have to be this way. They tried to make it this way, but the brought down the Rambam doesn't mention this. Now, Amar Rebavahu Mikra. So Rebavahu says, so what's the hint in the pasuk that they were big over the mizbeach, that they were Nemar, as it says, Isru Chag, make a surround on the sukkahs, ba'avoisim, with these branches, ad karnais hamizbeach, they should be high up to the kronos, up to the corners of the mizbeach, and the understanding is that they would stand them high up to the corners of the mizbeach, and this way they would be able to be bent over on top of the mizbeach. That's the understanding. Rashi says Isru means hakifu. He brings a proof that hakifu, which means surround it, and ad karnas hamizbeach. Rashi says ad kronos shehin kavoisman hamizbeach amma. They had to be high, an extra amma high, which allowed it to bend over. In other words, what it seems like from Rashi is Rashi wants to understand how do we know that it wasn't supposed to be nigrar, like bent, pulled on top of the mizbeach, rather it would fold over, because it says ad karnes hamizbeach, that it stayed high all the way up to where the karnes, the corners are. It means it went an extra amma high, and that would allow it to be to bend over the mizbeach and not just to be pulled on top of the mizbeach. I guess that's the way it looks nice, maybe. That when you have it this greenery sort of like over hanging over the mizbeach, it gave it a certain beauty, maybe. Just a thought.
Rabbi,
Yes.
there's a note here. It
Okay.
says apparently the measurements of the 11 amos is not an absolute requirement. Rather, to enhance the mitzvah, they sought branches of that length, according to Rav Yaakov Emden. And then it says, see Kapos Tamarim and Arach Laner, who conclude from the formulation of the Rambam that if they did not find branches that long, they would take shorter branches and stand them on the surrounding ledges or of the altar, or even higher, instead of on the base, so that the branches would lean over the top of the mizbeach.
Right. So in other words, if they didn't have big enough ones, how did they fulfill this pasuk of Ad Karnes HaMizbeach? They basically would make do by putting it on top of the soivev, or somehow making it work. They would make it work, however big they got it. But the point is that it doesn't seem that they needed to be that measure of 11 amos. 11 amos was not an absolute. If they were able to get 11 amos, that was the ideal. But to fulfill the Ad Karnes HaMizbeach, they always wanted it to be up all the way go all the way up to where the corners are situated. That's what it seems to the fulfill that pasuk to. Okay. Amar Rebbe Avo. So now the next Gemara. Rebbe Avo says, Amar Rebbe Lazar, in the name of Rebbe Lazar, Kalanoita lulav ba'agudai, whoever takes the lulav in its binding, vahadas ba'avoisai, and the hadas with its braiding. In other words, if you take the lulav properly and with the hadas properly, in other words, use a kosher hadas, mala olav akosov, the Torah considers it ke'ilu bana mizbeach, as if a person built a mizbeach, vehikriv olav korban, and he brought on the mizbeach a sacrifice. It's as if he built the mizbeach and he brought a sacrifice on the mizbeach. When you make the lulav, when you put it together, you are noita lulav be'iguda, which basically means you bound the lulav together properly, and you did it right with the hadas as well. So it's considered that you built the mizbeach and hikr of olive carbon. You brought a carbon. Well, where do we see that? So it's another derivation of this puzzle, another way of learning the puzzle. Isru Chag, tie together the lulav on Sukkot, ba'avoisim, together with the avoisim, the hadas, and it's Ad Karnes HaMizbeach. It's as if you built the Mizbeach and you put the blood on the corners of the Mizbeach. Rashi says that it's ba'avoisim with the hadas, which is a voice of 3 badin, of 3 branches, or possibly Rashi means of 3 ulin, of 3 leaves that are continuous throughout the hadas. So it is interesting why is the Torah, or why is the pasuk emphasizing the hadas more than the arava? It's called anoita lulav be'igudai and hadas ba'avoisai. Like it needs to be that you included the hadas with the lulav, and you tied them together. But why does it emphasize the hadas, not the arava? The arava also should be included. What does it mean vahadas ba'avoisa? And it's emphasizing the uh, the braiding of the hadas. So I'm just thinking that maybe it was hard to find hadassim, maybe that were braided proper, that were the three. Maybe that's why it says it, that if you tie it together with the beauty of the hadas, which was made with these three, so then it's ad karnes hamizbeach. It's as if you put the blood on the corners. They built the mizbeach and put the blood on the corners of the mizbeach. I don't know if any of the art scroll or the Steinsaltz explains why are we emphasizing the hadas more than the arava there, but that's the way. In other words, the pasuk says it that way, but I'm saying, like, why would that be? Why is it bringing that out? The hadas versus the arava. Now, Amar Reb Yirmiyah Mishum Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Again, we're on 45b. We turn the page, top line. Amar Reb Yirmiyah Mishum Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Reb Yochanan Mishum Reb Shimon Hamachoizi. Mishum Reb Yochanan Hamachoisi. So there's all these names that we're mentioning. Reb Yirmiyah said the name of Rashbi, or Reb Yochanan said the name of Reb Shimon Hamachoizi, and the name of Reb Yochanan Hamachoisi. Kol ha'oise Isur lachag, a person who attaches to the holiday, ba'achila ushasiya, with eating and drinking. So malavakazim kilo banam mizbeach, we go the carbon. It's as if he built a mizbeach and he brought a sacrifice. Shenemar, as it says, Isru Chag, attached to the holiday, ba'avoisim, with fatness, fat animals, the delicious foods, avoisim, ad karnes hamizbeach. It's as if you built a mizbeach and you put the blood on the corners of the mizbeach, hikra bal of carbon. It's as if you brought a sacrifice. So that's one understanding, that it means to beautify the holiday, or to enhance the holiday with eating and drinking. Of course, the other understanding is that Isru Lachag means that you attach another day to the holiday called Isru Chag, and that's what we do. We try to consider the day after Yontiv also a holiday, and we're supposed to have a special meal on that day, or some add in your achilu shsia something nice, and if you do that, it's as if you brought a carbon. You built a mizbeach and brought a carbon. So that would be another meaning of Isru Chag. So there's two meanings here. One is celebrating on the holiday properly, achilu shsia, and the other is celebrating on the day after the holiday. You're attaching a day to the holiday, and that would be the other meaning of this statement, that would be considered as if you brought a carbon. Yes,
it says that it says Israel is add. Translates Israel as add, ADD.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, Isru, Rashi says aguda, like a attack. It would seem that word Isru, the way Rashi translates it, you could say both, that it means the either on the Yom Tov you're joining the holiday with food and drink, avoisim, with these avoisim, or you're joining a day to the holiday. I think Rashi is not translating it as add. I think he's translating it as joining, attaching. But okay, well, add, I guess, could mean that. But Israel means like tying or binding.
He translated it, said add to the festival.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. All right. Now the next Gemara, Amar Chizkiah. Oh, time is up here. Okay, well, should we stop here? You want to do one more little piece? Amar Chizkiah, let's do one more little piece. Amar Chizkiah, Amar Yirmiyah Mishum Mishum Ben Yochai, that kol mitzvahs kol aneinam yetz ben ela derech yedilasan. Person doesn't fulfill the mitzvah, all the mitzvahs. A person doesn't fulfill only if he holds them in the way that they grow. The bottom on the bottom, the top on the top. Shenemar, as it says, Aftze shitim oimdim, that the way the shitim woods was made for the Mishkan, it had to be standing. We have a price like this. The Ati Shitim were standing the way they grew. And so we'll stop there. That's the understanding from that pasuk, that it had to be the way that they grew and not on the side.
Rabbi, you want to end
How
with
that
a picture?
applies to halacha. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Maybe. Yeah, that's what you should see is a pitum on the top, and the ukits on the bottom. They picked a bad picture, I think, because it's at least it's unclear here. But the pitum would be on the top. You're supposed to hold the esrog that way. Shkoyach, very good. We're gonna stop here. Ezra,
Thank
did you want to say
you,
something?
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Okay.
you, Rabbi. I apologize. My phone has had major problems with Zoom, so if I fall in and out, I apologize.
No problem.
Yes.
Okay.